Welcome to FFT and 5. I'm Chris Towers here with Emory Hunt. We're going to get to know the top QB prospects for the 2023 NFL Draft. And Emory, why don't you just start us off? Hit me with your top five.
Well, my top five is Anthony Richardson of Florida. I like Bryce Young of Alabama and CJ Stroud of Ohio State. I have all three with the same grades, but I stacked them 1, 2, and 3 that way. 4, I have Todd Centeio of James Madison, fantastic quarterback. And rounded out my top 5 is Jaron Hall of BYU, with just on the outside looking in is Hendon Hooker.
There is one name that you didn't mention that we'll get to shortly, but from a fantasy perspective, one thing that we've seen over the past couple of seasons is the classic the rankings for real life and the rankings for fantasy don't necessarily line up. Trevor Lawrence was the clear QB1 from his draft class, but it took him a little while to make a fantasy impact. Whereas, someone like Jalen Hurts fell to the second round. It wasn't clear people even thought he was going to be a starter. Has turned out to be an elite fantasy quarterback. So, that rushing potential obviously is a big deal for our purposes. In this class, how would you rank these guys in terms of fantasy appeal? Not necessarily likelihood to win a Super Bowl, just getting us those fantasy points.
CT, that's a great question. I feel like when you look at it from that scope and trying to project where guys are going to go, I would probably rank them CJ Stroud, because I kind of figured he could fit right into maybe Indianapolis. I would also go with Bryce Young at number 2, because Houston could be a spot for him. But then Anthony Richardson would be 3rd, with him kind of running along the side of what Justin Fields was able to do as a rookie. And then second year, we saw that significant jump. So right now, year one fantasy, I feel like Stroud, if you pluck him in right away in Indianapolis, he reminds me a lot of Troy Aikman. He throws the football really well. He has good enough athleticism to pick up a few yards and make a few plays in the run game. But mostly his work will get done in the passing game. So I think his passing numbers would be great. I think Bryce Young in Houston would thrive because he has that flair for the dramatic, sort of what we saw with Deshaun Watson first jumped on the scene down there in Houston. And Richardson, let's say Carolina, with those weapons they have, those tight ends, those backs, those receivers, I think he has a great chance to thrive in that scenario, but not in year one, but mainly year 2. I would usurp him in year 2 over these other guys.
And the guy that you didn't mention in that top 5, Will Levis from Kentucky, he's kind of the controversial pick of this draft class. It sounds like he's going to go in the first round. You didn't have him as your top 5. Talking to you before the show, you don't have him in your top 15. So tell me what it is that you don't love about him.
He's my QB 17. He's someone that I think is kind of maxed as a prospect. And yes, people will make excuses for the offensive line. The offensive coordinator left. The offense was different. Hey, man, if you got to make all these excuses for the player, maybe it's the player, because other guys thrive in unfair situations and they still show the talent. I feel like Levis is kind of what he's going to be. And to me, it's more along the lines of what we're seeing from a Carson Wentz. So I feel like he's going to be your classic 24 touchdowns, 25 touchdowns, 14 to 15 interception type guy. Not great for fantasy purpose for sure, but definitely also not someone you want to take in the first round.
Let me hear about a couple of sleepers, especially, who's got a chance to be like a Jalen Hurts from this class, someone who's overlooked but has a profile that could make him a very good fantasy option down the line.
I would also throw out the guy that I just mentioned in my top 5, Todd Centeio. Had a really good showing at the Hula Bowl, and then Trent got the call up to the NFLPA Bowl and did exceptionally well. I would also throw out Adrian Martinez. He kind of reminds me of that Dak Prescott type guy where you saw him at Nebraska, know about his career there. He goes to Kansas State and shows you, man, this guy definitely has something about him, but he had those injuries, and that's what happened this season. But on the field, you saw the talent. Also, you saw it down at the Hula Bowl as well. And then you look at someone like Malik Cunningham. Cunningham came in and checked in at 5'11", 6 feet, 187 pounds. We know about the athleticism, but it was his passing ability that got him the call up from the NFLPA Bowl to the Senior Bowl. And I thought he was probably the more consistent of the passers at the Senior Bowl. And we know about how many guys were struggling that week of work down there in Mobile. So I would say those 3 guys, late round type of options that has a chance to really surprise its pros.
All right, that's going to do it for FFT and 5. We'll be back next week. We're going to talk with Emory more about some of the running back prospects. We'll get into the wide receiver class in a couple of weeks. So it's going to be great stuff in the offseason. We'll talk to you later, Emory.